Hi, my name is Megan, and this is Everything Lit. Happy New Year's Eve. Hope you're doing something fun this evening. Let me tell you a funny story about this here boy. So this guy will yell at my door. Yeah, you want to get away? He will yell at my door, whether I'm up here or not. He'll just yell at the door to try and come up because he wants to be up here. And one of the other cats, Squeaks, if Vino's been yelling too long, Squeaks will go over there and bite him. He'll put his arm around him and try and make him submit. He's like, "You're annoying, shut up, I'm gonna try and bite you." And it's not funny because it's mean, and I go break him up if he does it. Usually I let Vino in my room before it gets to that point. But today, Vino cried at my door and I let him up here, but I was downstairs. And then he was crying on the inside of the door to come back out. And it's like, my guy, I'm sitting in the living room. If you want to be with me, you just have to come in the living room. If you want to be upstairs, you can be upstairs. But don't cry to get in and then cry to get out. And I know that's how cats work. But today, he is just on another level. Whiner. So today, the last day of 2023, I am bringing you my 10 favorite books of the year. These I all gave 5 stars, just phenomenal. They made me happy while I was reading. They made me feel things. They were just a great reading experience. I have 2 honorable mentions that I just want to talk a little bit about, but not go into detail. And that is Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle and Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This is a 2023 release, horror by Hugo Award finalist Chuck Tingle. I don't know what I expected going into this. I'm not a huge horror person, but I just think the messages behind this, the intent behind it was so good, and the writing supported the intent and the themes and the images. It all just worked together so beautifully and was also just a good story. It was scary. It was intentional, it was emotional, and it was queer, and it was full of queer joy and found family, and I just loved it, and I cannot wait to continue to watch. I am so excited to watch Chuck Tingle's career just keep growing. And Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, this is from 2018, I want to say. And I have been putting off reading it. 2019. I'm always a year off. But I've been putting off reading this for years because I just knew it was going to be so good and I wasn't ready to, feel these things. I wasn't ready. And I was right. It's fantastic. This is a fairy tale it's not even a retelling, but it's kind of a fairy tale retelling of Rumpelstiltskin or any sort of tale where someone is given an impossible challenge and then they meet the challenge. We've got ice, fae, we have magical mirrors and witches and Russian-inspired folktales. It was just fantastic. We have 3 female main characters who are smart and wily and clever and dangerous in their own ways and supporting each other, and I just loved it. I love Naomi Novik's writing, and I will read any book that she publishes. All right, so let's get into the top 10 of the year. Number 10 on this list is actually Paris, the memoir. I really enjoyed it. It was one of the first celebrity memoirs that I read this year and made me want to read more of them, which is the sign of a good book. It makes you want to read more just like it. And this is Paris Hilton's memoir about her time in a troubled children camp that rich people send their kids to, and they are absolutely horrific, abusive money grabs where they take kids and they just treat them awfully and give them trauma and PTSD and then milk their parents for all the money that they can because their parents think that they're helping their kids, whether it's with addiction or running away or behavioral issues, and actually they're just going to basically a prison, except worse, because these kids shouldn't be punished for what they've done or what is happening to them. One of the reasons that it's on this list as top 10 is because It made me want to read more celebrity memoirs. It gave me a new perspective on Paris Hilton. I think I talked about this in my wrap up, but as a 90s kid who did watch, I think, the first season of The Simple Life and knew about Paris Hilton, like, I didn't really like her. I bought into the image she sold of like dumb blonde rich girl, but actually she's so much smarter than that, and it was just an image. And I think seeing behind the veil was eye-opening. I really enjoyed it and gave it 5 stars. Number 9 is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is a romance. I also read People We Meet on Vacation this year, but I think this one is my favorite Emily Henry so far. I gave this 5 stars. It made me cry on multiple occasions. This is about a book agent, and she is like the big city woman. She has been broken up with on multiple occasions by a guy who like goes to a small town, finds that small town girl, and decides to stay, and like she's, you know, footloose and fancy free and teaches him the meaning of life. And our main character is the cold, heartless bitch left in the city. And I just loved the way that this played with those tropes of who the characters are and who they are supposed to be in the story of their life. And by the end, you know that Nora, the main character, you want her to have what she wants. And it almost makes you want her to get that small town life, but you know, like, you don't want her to. It's very confusing, very emotional. And so she is an agent. She pitches a book to this editor who is not into it. He doesn't want the book. He's very rude about it. And they kind of have beef. And then they run into each other at the small town on vacation and kind of strike up an unlikely friendship. And that friendship grows into something more. And their circumstances are both so realistically drawn. I feel like the relationships between these characters and just all the characters in the small town were so interesting and well done. And the like book within a book thing that was happening here, I think that was really well done, in that we got just enough of the book that they are working on together to enjoy that aspect and enjoy through them the book, while also enjoying like this book. And it was just fantastic. I gave it 5 stars. The audiobook was amazing, and that's what I listened to this on audio for, I think, all of it. It made me cry at least twice, except I was at work, so I had to like hold it in, and then I cried on the way home. Of the 3 Emily Henry books I've read so far, this is the one that I would want to reread. Number 8 on this list is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. This is a wild book. So we have our main character, and her college best friend has recently died. A lot of the authorities and people are saying it's suicide. A podcaster who does true crime stuff is kind of questioning that. He's like, is it suicide or was she murdered? And this podcaster is actually her hometown friend from childhood, and he like puts out a plea to her because he knows that she and this girl were friends, to say like, hey, come help me figure out what is happening. And she does. She goes and, you know, reaches out to him and tries to figure out what has happened to her ex best friend. This book is in my top 10 because it was fascinating. It was so interesting to read about these characters and how they get drawn in to this like cult, the mindset. This has a lot to say about female beauty standards and the way women are pitted against each other, but also the way that men look at women and the way young girls grow up knowing how they're being looked at. Like, you, even if you don't understand the intent behind it when you're like little, I shouldn't say little, but like 12 is little. When you're first developing and going through puberty and men start looking at you like that, even if you don't understand why, you understand that they're looking at you and they want something from you. And this was so interestingly done and so well thought out, in my opinion, that I just loved it. And on top of the interesting social commentary, there are twists on twists on twists in this book that I did not see coming. And I was gasping, I was shocked. The catharsis at the end. I think Ashley Winstead is really good at cathartic endings. or like the character getting what they really want. Just, I was rooting for this girl the whole way through. Like a lot of these books, I look at them and I think, man, I want to reread that. Ashley Winstead, I want to reread this. One of the things to get a book in my top 10 is to have really strong themes, because this explores such interesting themes and ideas about beauty, about sexuality, about the patriarchy. I loved it. I gave this 5 stars. That's why it's number 8 on this list. Number 7 is Self-Made Boys by Anna Marie Mecklemore. This is a Great Gatsby remix, and I put this on my list because the reading experience was so interesting. I think I used that word too much. This is a remix of The Great Gatsby where Gatsby and Nick are both trans boys, and Nick and Daisy are still cousins. In this, Nick is Latinx, Daisy is part Latinx. Daisy is passing as a white woman. She's lightened her hair, she stays out of the sun, so she's passing as a white woman, but she's part Latinx, and she's dating Tom Buchanan, who has no idea that she and Nick are related. They're kind of just childhood friends, but they're related because Nick is undeniably Latinx. The original Gatsby, with its ideas of class and wealth and beauty, is taken and made even more relevant to today with wealth and queerness and ethnicity put onto these different characters. So I think that it was just such a good remix, a retelling. It had a strong purpose in what it was doing, and I think it achieved it. And also, the beautiful images from the original novel were translated into this version so well. You know, the flowers at Nick's, the Nick Gatsby tension that I think is in the original, is drawn out so nicely. And then we also get Gatsby introducing Nick to these queer spaces in 1920s New York, because queer people have always existed and they've always made spaces for each other. And just seeing that was wonderful. This was such a wonderful, interesting retelling, and I would love to see. So Great Gatsby is still taught in high school, right? People still have to read The Great Gatsby. It would be so fascinating to build a reading list or an assignment out of you read The Great Gatsby, because you probably have to meet federal whatever standards or state standards, but then you give the class books like this and have them make those connections between what the original is saying and what this new one is saying, and how this was updated and how they used the original text to say something even deeper or say something even more relevant today. 5 stars. And when we talk about Gatsby, right, we always talk about the lyrical writing. F. Scott Fitzgerald, lyricist, beautiful, gorgeous sentences. This had that too. And I think that is why this is such a wonderful retelling, because often you get the plot points that are remixed and retold, and you get the characters just about right, but not many people can get the style and the feeling of the book right. And I think that is another thing that makes this such an amazing remix, is that it had the feeling right. It had the story and the feeling and the writing and the beauty and the sadness and everything. And I gave it 5 stars. Fantastic retelling of Gatsby. Is my number 6 choice cheating? Maybe, but I read both of these this year. I read The Hacienda and Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. I read them both this year. I wanted to put one on the list and I couldn't pick. I'm pretty sure I gave them both 5 stars. If I had to, push come to shove, I don't actually know what one I would pick. Okay, so let's talk about them both real quick. The Hacienda is a haunted house story. It takes place in Mexico. Our main character's father was executed during the overthrow of the Mexican government, and she has found a husband now and moved to his house, and his sister is weird. The house is foreboding. She sees things at night, she hears things at night, and he's like gone on business a lot of the time, and she thinks she's going mad. No one is helping her. And then she meets this priest who may or may not have magical powers. Magical powers sounds too much. Who may or may not be some sort of witch, and he believes her and wants to help her cleanse the house of this evil spirit. And it was romantic and gothic and creepy, and you wonder, is she going insane, or is she really seeing things? Is there something really wrong? I think there's not a lot of ambiguity about what's happening. I think we know that there is something in the house, but it was so fantastically done. The atmosphere was good. I just enjoyed it so much. And Vampires of El Norte, similar, the romance is phenomenal. We have these two characters who are friends as children. Something horrible happens one night. Our main female character, Nena, is attacked by this creature, may or may not be a vampire, and Nestor thinks that she is dead, and so he runs away. And these two people are separated for years and years and years, and he doesn't know she's alive, and she doesn't know why he left. And it's so tense and amazing. And she is just trying to find her place on her family's ranch. And of course, her father wants to marry her off to, connect the ranches and, make them more wealthy. And she wants to stay and become a healer. And their families are so intertwined. She knows Nestor's abuela and works with her to be a healer on the property. But then we also have the Texas-Mexico war happening, and so they have to go off to war, but there are also vampires threatening them, and our two characters are kind of thrown together, and they just have each other's backs no matter what happens, and they care about each other, and they don't always understand how the other is feeling, but then when they do, it's so satisfying. And I feel like between the two, if you made me pick a true number 6, it might be Vampires of El Norte, just because the romance in this was so built up more, I think, than the romance in this. And that is something that I think Isabel Cañas does amazingly well. I also love the historical aspect. I think she does very well at drawing out what's happening and what time period we're in and who, the important players of the time period, and the feeling, the atmosphere in both of these is just perfect. It's perfect. The action at some parts, the climax, fantastic. These are just super well written, well done books, and I cannot wait to see what she does next, because these are top tier. Number 5 on my list, right in the middle, is In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. I don't know if I can adequately express how much I love this book. And the other thing is, I don't know, it was surprising to me how much I love this book. And I didn't love it until, 100 pages from the end. The beginning was very slow, and so let me tell you what this is about. This is about Victor, and he lives in this kind of treehouse fort with his father, who is an android, Giuseppe, and he and Giuseppe kind of fix up robots that they've found at the junkyard. So we have Nurse Ratched and Rambo. And they're, in the beginning, they're kind of one note. I got kind of annoyed. They have their shtick that they keep doing. Nurse Ratched is psychotic murder bot, but she's a nurse and she always wants to give people shots and, chop people's heads off. And Rambo is just an innocent little vacuum, and he's silly and scared of things. He has anxiety. And at first, I was like, okay, what's happening here? I'm annoyed. They all find another robot in the junkyard and take him back to the treehouse, fix him up, help him, bring him back to life. We find out more about this world through this robot and what's happening outside of their treehouse jungle utopia. Because of Hap, this robot that they found, they are discovered. They were in hiding, and Giuseppe is taken away to the city of Electric Dreams, and thus the adventure begins of our protagonists going to the city to save Giuseppe and bring him back. After that point, when they start their adventure, this becomes so much more than it was. We learn about the world, we learn about these other robots, we meet other characters who are fascinating and a little more multi-layered. This book, A lot of people won't like it, and I get that. It was very personally cathartic, and I sobbed probably the last 50 pages because of how empathetic this book is, but also how heartbreaking. I did not expect for this to be one of my favorite books of the year. I love TJ Klune, but I also read Under the Whispering Door this year, and I read that and I loved it and I thought it would be my favorite. But the way that this just reached into my chest and squeezed cannot be emphasized enough. Like, I stayed up way too late reading this to finish it because I was sobbing and I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop sobbing, and I couldn't stop reading the book. You can't just stop crying and go to bed when you don't know what's happened in the end. So this was just fantastic, and I will read everything that TJ Klune writes. Number 4 on my favorites of the year is Lion's Legacy by L.C. Rawson. This was a complete surprise. Had no idea that this book was coming out, had no idea what it was about. This was in July. We had a loss in our family in June, and I went to the bookstore that week at some point, because that's what I do when I'm sad. I go buy books. That's why I bought a lot this year. And I was just wandering around looking at things, didn't really have a list. Usually I have like a book or two in mind, and I didn't this time. And I saw this and I thought, that looks gay. And boy, is it. This is a YA adventure romance paranormal series. It's the first in a duology, at least, because there's another one coming out. It's about a 17-year-old who is on this like archaeology adventure TV show with his dad. They go on actual adventures, solve puzzles, find ancient treasures for people who have hired them. Our main character, Tennessee Russo, which is such a good name. Tennessee finds out that his dad sells the artifacts to the highest bidder rather than giving them back to the family that asked to help them find it or whatever. And he quits the show. And then our story actually happens 2 years later. After this big blow up, his dad comes back and is like, I need your help finding these sacred bands of thieves. It talks about this band of warriors who were all queer, and they all had these rings that gave them extra power. And this talks a lot about queer history and the erasure of queer history, and the way archaeologists don't treat queer history. They don't believe it, I guess. It's not their first thought. With this sacred band of thieves, people are like, oh yeah, they're just brothers in arms. They're not lovers. But they basically have wedding rings that give them superpowers. They're gay, my guy. And this was just such an unexpected delight. I love the feeling, and it doesn't happen that often anymore, of going into the bookstore and just wandering around and finding a book, picking it up, it sounds interesting, and when you read it, it actually is phenomenal. And this was that. Our main character he's 17, but he's thoughtful, he's funny, he's got a good sense of humor, he is adventurous, he's dealing with this disappointment in his dad and a boyfriend who has cheated on him. He finds a new, I don't want to say love, because it does stay so ambiguous. He flirts with one boy, he flirts with another, he goes on an adventure with this Greek boy, and it was just so fun and adventurous and queer, so queer, with queer history and queer themes, and it has important things to say about queer representation throughout history, because it can be so alienating to think that you're the first of your kind, right? Or you're the first person who's felt this way. But if you can have that history and see how others have lived, you have more options for how you can live. It opens people's doors, widens the path that you can walk on. And I think that this was just phenomenal. It's a phenomenal YA adventure romance with good queer themes. And I would love for everyone to read this. I don't think that's true. I don't think everyone would love this, but I think a lot of people would love this. Number 3 on this list probably isn't a surprise. I've talked about it, how it's been my favorite romance of the year, and that holds true. That is The Neighbor Favorite by Christina Forrest. This is a romance, and it is about a woman who reaches out to her favorite author. You know, he's just started a website. She's so excited to see it. She's waiting for the next book to come out, and she reaches out to her favorite author, and he responds, and they have this lovely email conversation, and then he ghosts her. They talk over like the span of a year, maybe. And then he ghosts her, doesn't respond anymore, and she's really heartbroken about it because they've struck such a good friendship, and they were kind of leaning toward true feelings, romance. Then we find out our main character lives in this building. Her life has kind of imploded. She's living with her sister, and this new man moves in down the hall, and he knows, or I should say, he figures out that she's the one he's been talking to because he's the author, but she doesn't know he's the author. And he kind of keeps up this charade throughout the book, and you really, good tension. It's good tension, but they also, like, you get to read their emails in the beginning, and they have such good banter, a good rapport with each other, that you get the chemistry before they even meet. And then when they do meet, you're already rooting for it. I think this was really brilliantly paced and written. But beyond that, they do have such good chemistry, and it was so fun to read their banter, to read him like freaking out because he's like, oh my god, I recognize her. What are the odds that these people do, that there are two people in the world who do this, this, and this, and own a dog that's named this, or a cat, sorry, it's a cat. They own a cat that's named this, and just, he figures it out so quickly, and you understand why. One of the things that makes this my favorite romance of the year is the climax. You almost expect it from other stories to be ultra dramatic, and she is just horrified and lied to and betrayed when she finds out, because obviously she finds out that he is the writer that she had email correspondence with, that they had feelings for, and then they've been kind of fake dating, he's been helping her figure out a wedding date for her sister's wedding, and you think that it's going to be this huge dramatic thing. And on the one hand, it kind of is, but her response is so genuine and angry, but empathetic. Like, she gets it, but she also obviously doesn't get it. And they have such a good conversation around this moment. And she gives him the opportunity to explain, and he apologizes. And like, the way that it all comes together in the end is so perfect. And it doesn't feel too overdramatic, and it doesn't feel like either party is digging their heels in and not listening to the other or not giving in. Like, she is angry, understandably, but he apologizes, and she, you know, they talk it through and like figure out their issues and decide that like being together is what they want, and they, you know, overcome all the conflicts and all of the baggage to be together because they work so well. And it was a very cozy romance. It was cozy and warm and sweet and genuine, and I absolutely loved it. Number 2 on this list is, so I struggled between figuring out which is my number 1 favorite and which is my second favorite, and should I switch them. And I actually don't own this book yet. I'm waiting until it comes out in paperback. My number 2 favorite book of the year is Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. And I've already watched some other content about people's best and worst of the year, and I feel like this is coming up on a lot of people's worst lists, and I'm shooketh. I am shook because I found this book so incredibly engrossing, absolutely phenomenal. Ashley Winstead takes a theme and she freaking goes for it. She has something to say and she's gonna say it. And that is what I appreciate about her thrillers so much. They all have a very strong message that they are trying to get across, and I feel like everything in the book comes together to say that message. Tiny sidebar, one of the reasons Addie LaRue didn't work for me was because it felt like the message that was trying to be given was undermined by the ending, right? It didn't make sense to me. If you're building this theme and then you're just gonna whoop, and the ending undoes that, like, make it make sense. Whereas Ashley Winstead, 2 of her books were on my favorites list. I'm a stan for Ashley Winstead now. I need to read her romances because, oh my God. So talking about Midnight is the Darkest Hour, this is about a young woman. She is the preacher's daughter, and she has felt kind of pinned in by expectations, and her escape, her joy has been reading, but she has to do it on the sly, make sure her parents don't know what she's reading so she can get away with reading like banned books or inappropriate books or whatever. And she and the town like outcast from the wrong side of the tracks, Everett, become friends through a kind of traumatic incident. But they stay friends from like 16 to 24, I think is when this book happens. They're 23, 24. And they're just an unconventional pairing, but people kind of give them leeway because she's such a good girl, right? She's the preacher's daughter. She's such a good girl. The expectations of her is like, she's a pity friend, right? He needs someone to like look out for him. She's so kind that she's being friends with this poor boy as pity. But they actually have so much in common. They both feel like outsiders. They feel downtrodden, and just they connect through nature and going on adventures and dreaming of bigger things. And that is how their relationship, solidifies. He leaves and comes back every summer to visit her. This summer he's visiting, and it's just incredible. Ruth, our main character, she's dating this guy that her parents want her to date, and Everett is like, why are you doing this? He really wants to break her out of the conditioning of like being the good girl. But this also has so much to say about teenage girls and the power of teenage girls. People are calling it Twilight fan fiction. That isn't a reason to hate it. If you think it's Twilight fan fiction, give me other reasons. But also, if it is Twilight, like, it is the best kind of Twilight fan fiction. It is the fan fiction that I didn't know I wanted until I read it. Because let me tell you, I read 50 Shades of Grey. I call it 50 Shades of Barf. Hate it. That's not it. That's not what we're wanting. This is what the girls want. And it was phenomenal. There were twists. There were turns. There was big conspiracies. It talks about religion and religious trauma and the damage that we do to people in the name of religion. And for what? This is another book like The Last Housewife, where at the end you want the woman to take her power back. You want her to do the unspeakable, do the bad thing, because that is what should be done. That is the right thing. And there's so much in this book about gray morality and what is right versus what is good. And it was such a fascinating discussion, and I ate that shit up. I talked about this in my wrap up with this book in it. The ending had me, to use the, Gen Z gay slang, the ending had me gagged. I was surprised, saddened. I thought I had 50 pages left in the book, and then it ended, and I could not. I would reread this in a hot second, maybe when I get the paperback. Top tier. Ashley Winstead said, teenage girls are the scariest thing out there, and wrote it in a book. I think the romance as well was really tense, really well done. All the pieces came together in the end, because I will admit, in the middle, I was kind of like, what's going on here? Like, what are we doing? There was just so many different, disparate things happening. And then when it comes together, you're like, she really did that. 5 stars, absolutely. Second best book of the year, but I for a second thought maybe it should be the best book. And finally, my number one favorite book of the year, you may have already known, you may have expected. That is Where You Can Find Me by Sherry Joseph. I immediately bought one of her other books. It was only available in ebook form, and I was like, boop, I'm purchasing that. This is a story about a family where the son was kidnapped at age 11, and the mother does her damnedest, the father too, like the parents do their damnedest to find him. They create a nonprofit, they help find people's children who have been kidnapped, but they're always looking for their own. And after 3 years, they do find him, and he is returned to his family, but having experienced trauma, we'll just say. And he has a younger sister, and she is turning the age, she's about 11 now, turning the age he was when he was kidnapped. It is just an exploration of this family and how they deal with mostly the aftermath of getting him back, how they deal with getting what they wanted. But on the one hand, like, he has experienced so much and grown for 3 years that like they can't have back the son that they lost. they have this new person and they have to navigate that. And so because of the nonprofit and the police force and the media scrutiny, the mother decides to move their family to Costa Rica with her mother-in-law to give them a break. They'll enroll in school, they'll go to Costa Rica for like a year, maybe they won't, maybe they'll go back to the US, maybe they won't. So the mother moves her 2 kids to Costa Rica. The father says, that's crazy, I don't think we should do that. He stays behind with the idea that he'll join them after he ties some things up, right? Because they created this nonprofit, they have a business, whatever. The themes, I love a good theme. I love a book that supports its theme. And in this, Caleb, the boy, is trying to reassociate with his family and these people that he basically doesn't know anymore. And he feels so changed by his trauma, and he needs to figure out how to exist in this like normal family again. The daughter is trying to figure out how to live with this brother and how to, navigate having been the only child for 3 years, having been scrutinized even more and protected even more, and really feeling the effects of his disappearance and seeing her parents live through that. And now this, like, she also has to deal with that trauma and relearning, re-knowing this person. And of course their relationship is interesting and fraught because she's becoming the age that he was when he was taken, and he gets to see, like, I don't know, the innocence that he lost basically. And the mother is dealing with learning about her son and her idea of him before he was taken, and kind of figuring out who he is now, and also dealing with the trauma of what he's gone through and who he can talk to and the resources. And like, he makes friends in Costa Rica, and he makes friends with a like non-binary person who is kind of abused by their family and maligned. And it was just so empathetic and thoughtfully drawn, this slow, beautiful unraveling of a story. And I was enraptured. I loved it. I could not get enough of these characters, and there are things happening with the investigation of, like, he was taken and he was like sold into this ring, and they're trying to bring down that child trafficking like ring. So the detectives are still kind of in contact. It was so multi-layered and emotional, and there was this tense section of the book where I felt kind of sick. I was so worried for this character because he kind of has a choice to stay with his family or maybe get back involved in the trafficking ring that he was saved from. It was heart-wrenching and beautiful to watch him grow and realize his, agency when he had none for so long. This book was exactly what I thought it would be, but also so much more. Like, I knew I was gonna love it. I knew it would be really interesting, but it was just so much better than I could have imagined. And that is why it is my favorite book of the year. The brilliance of moving their family to Costa Rica and having the family be integrated into this world where they don't speak the language very well. They're learning how to exist in this foreign country mirrors Caleb's journey of learning how to exist in this nuclear family again. And just the way they used the animals of Costa Rica and the setting to give a map or give an idea, give a feeling and an atmosphere to Caleb's struggle and journey in his family. And they're living in a hotel that's like built into the side of the mountain, and parts of it are crumbling away, and just like that metaphor of like the ground is unsteady beneath their feet, and like he feels like he can't find his footing in their family yet. And just every part of this book was so well thought out to add to the internal journeys and struggles, and to make those connections, or help the reader make those connections between Caleb's journey and struggles and like the family overall. Like, this took such skill and such research and such empathy to create this story. and I love it for that. I think it's fantastic. So those were my 10 favorite books of the year. I read some absolutely phenomenal stories, and I'm learning about myself. I'm learning that I love a story that says something important, that has a theme and a strong message behind it, and the story, in my opinion, supports the message it's trying to give. So thank you for watching. Let me know what your favorite book of the year has been, if you've read any of these, if you liked them. If you hated them, that's okay. We can all have our opinions. But if you liked this video, you could click that like button, you could subscribe, but really, you can do whatever you want. And I will see you tomorrow for my new goals of 2024. Have a happy new year.